Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents I Used to Have Cancer, How I Found My Own Way Back to Health by James Templeton. Foreword by Dwight L. McKee, M.D. Narrated by A.T. Chandler. Disclaimer. The information and advice contained in this book are based upon the research and the personal and professional experiences of the authors. They are not intended as a substitute for consulting with a healthcare professional. The publisher and author are not responsible for any adverse effects or consequences resulting from the use of any of the suggestions, preparations, or procedures discussed in this book. All matters pertaining to your physical health should be supervised by a healthcare professional. It is a sign of wisdom, not cowardice, to seek a second or third opinion. Foreword. James Templeton is indeed a born storyteller, and his story is an important one. There is a saying within conventional medicine that the plural of anecdote, a fancy word for story, is not evidence. Nevertheless, such stories are important. They make us realize that unusual things are possible, and if more people engage in such possibility thinking, then more things may become possible. I have worked with people with cancer challenges in many different ways since 1973, first as a medical student exploring nutritional therapies, then as a young holistic medical doctor exploring alternative cancer therapies, and ultimately as a medical oncologist, having done 6 years of hospital-based residency and fellowship training after 12 years in practice of holistic integrative medicine. Early in this process, I had the insight that viewing cancer as a teacher who tells us about how we've been living our lives can be far more productive than battling it as an enemy. In this book, Mr. Templeton, after telling the engaging story of his very enlightening journey with melanoma, reached the conclusion that having cancer helped teach him how to live fully and healthfully. He has since devoted his life to helping others deal with similar challenges, providing information, products, and inspiration so that others may find what he found. The first step in dealing with an incurable cancer is believing that vibrant, cancer-free health can be obtained. If one doesn't believe this, then the cancer truly is incurable. My advice to people facing significant cancer challenges has long been to find therapies and practitioners that inspire confidence. Confidence is fundamental to healing from cancer. Fear is deadly. It activates the sympathetic fight-flight-freeze nervous system, which deactivates the parasympathetic nervous system, which controls the digestive and immune functions, both of which are fundamental to healing from cancer. Another important lesson that comes through in this book is the importance of trusting one's intuition. Every person's path to healing will be a little different from everyone else's. Certainly, there are overarching principles that apply to all, but the details can be quite different. We don't yet have the science to reliably guide us to cures of advanced stages of many types of cancer, and intuition may well be our best guide. It certainly served James Templeton well. He knew instinctively, for instance, that macrobiotics was to play a major role in his recovery, even before he learned anything about it. Through his story, discover Templeton's principles of healthy living. He can inspire a confidence in the people he counsels that no oncologist or scientist can. James Templeton has succeeded in staying well despite the odds, which were strongly stacked against him. You can too. Dwight L. McKee, M.D., CNS, ABIHM, Board Certified in Medical Oncology, Nutrition, Integrative and Holistic Medicine. 1. Living the American Dream. We are stronger in the places we have been broken. Ernest Hemingway. It's funny how life can throw major curveballs at you when you least expect it. When I was in my early 30s, I absolutely believed that I was at the top of my game. I was living the American dream, had a family of my own, a nice house on a small farm, and a number of successful businesses in my East Texas hometown. Everything was going great. I guess you might say I had life by the tail. Little did I know that although I had overcome a number of challenges in my life at that point, my biggest challenge was yet to come. The day started out like most others, but I had no idea a new curveball was headed my way. I got up before dawn to go on my morning run. It wasn't so much that I liked waking up early to pound the pavement, but I was addicted to it. Running was my way of keeping a tight rein on what I considered to be a family curse. My mother died before I was 2, so I really don't remember her. I never had a chance to get to know my grandfather either. He died at the ripe young age of 36, many years before I was even born. I was told he died because of a bad heart. My younger stepbrother died at the age of 8, never really getting to enjoy life. But when my father, Daddy, died unexpectedly of a heart attack when he was only 46, it affected me deeply, unlike anything that had ever affected me before. I became enraged that life had dealt me yet another blow. I'm deeply grateful for my sister Judy, who is 2.5 years older than I am. Throughout the difficult years of growing up, she was my guardian angel. I don't know what I would have done without her. To this day, there has never been an unkind word between us. Judy has been the thread that has held our family together over the years and provided me with the stability I needed. While I knew that it wasn't possible to prevent every premature death, I sure as hell didn't want to go to an early grave the way my father and grandfather did. So I did the one thing that I thought could help. I ran. I ran every chance I got, in the pouring rain, in the sweltering heat, and in the bitter cold. Whether I was home or on the road, I ran. I realize now I was running from fear. But back then, running was my way of proving to myself that I had found a way to sidestep my family's curse. Heart disease. Running was also my time for meditation, the time when I did my deepest thinking. I felt virtuous, proud, wise, and sometimes even invincible when I was running. It's great to be alive, I thought as I darted out the front door and down the dusty farm road. Even though the sun was not yet up, I could tell it was going to be one of those summer days when rivers of sweat would soon be running down my face and trickling down my neck and back. I could already feel my shirt starting to cling to my back. Jumping the railroad tracks, I continued running until I reached the smooth pavement of the rural highway. I ran along the road with the woods on either side. On a warm night in East Texas, the woods sounded rowdier than a busy bar, with crickets singing, owls hooting, and frogs bellowing on the banks of a nearby pond. But when the locusts and songbirds take over just before daylight, you couldn't find a better symphony anywhere. It was my favorite time of day. Once I was up and around, that is. About the only vehicle I'd ever encountered during those early morning runs was an occasional log truck. As the long, empty vehicle rumbled by on its way to pick up the daily harvest of tall pine trees or post oaks, I'd enjoy the brief rush of air left in its wake. The path I followed on my morning runs led me past the visual reminders of the losses in my life. Less than 4 miles from my front door as the crow flies was Blackjack Cemetery. This prominent local landmark is where many of my family members were buried. It had become my touchstone. Circling the little church there, I glanced over at my daddy's grave. I always felt closer to him when I ran, believing he would have been gratified to know what I had accomplished. 15 miles or so from my house was yet another cemetery where many other family members had been laid to rest. I was proud and felt privileged to live where generations of my ancestors had settled. They were part of the bricks and mortar that built the great state of Texas. I come from a long line of fighters. Some fought not only in the War of 1812, but also in the War for Texas independence some 24 years later. My ancestors had come to Texas in 1832 when Mexico was giving land grants to foreigners. It wasn't long before the Texans outnumbered the Mexicans. Then the inevitable happened. The Mexican government's attempt to regulate the growing Texas communities led to outright rebellion. So when General Sam Houston called for a volunteer militia to fight for Texas's independence after the battle at the Alamo, my ancestors were right there with him in the cause. One April afternoon in 1836, General Houston and his group of about 800 Texans launched a surprise attack at the Battle of San Jacinto, near present-day Houston. It was there that they thoroughly routed the Mexican army of nearly twice as many men, led by General Santa Anna. Seems they figured out that attacking the enemy during their daily siesta would give them a real surprise advantage. I've always admired my family's fighting spirit, ingenuity, and just plain good horse sense, often against incredible odds. As it turned out, I would need to tap into these same qualities very shortly, in the fight for my own life. My sister Judy and I agree that we couldn't have asked for a better father. His early death came as a real shock to all of us who knew and loved him. Though we felt cheated by his death, we recognized that the time we had with him was precious. Daddy never had an unkind word for anyone. He wasn't what folks considered wealthy, but he was a talented man who was rich in all the things that matter: kindness, character, and loyalty. He was also rich in the love of his family. A machinist by trade, my father could build or fix anything. He took meticulous care in all that he did and of everything he owned, from the roof on our house to our lawn, which he kept perfectly manicured. By his example, he taught me to do the same. Keeping my house, my car, and all my belongings in tip-top shape is something that has always been important to me. Daddy would take me to my Little League and football games, and he even helped coach as often as he could. We'd watch baseball games on TV in the summer and the Houston Oilers and Dallas Cowboys during football season. He'd also take me hunting every once in a while, as was more or less expected of the men of that time and place. I looked forward to spending those times with him. We'd mostly just sit quietly in the deer stand on those early mornings in the woods. Though we'd be on the lookout for a big buck, more often than not, it was a doe and one or two of her little ones that would walk by. We'd sit in silence and let them pass, and they never knew we were there. Most folks said my daddy never really got over my mother's death, and I thought that was probably true. Lena Fay, his first wife, and my mother, was known as one of the prettiest girls in town. I'm told she was happy-go-lucky, musically inclined, and even played the violin in her college orchestra. I've often wondered how my life would have been different had she lived, and if she would have taught me how to play an instrument too. When I was 4 years old, my father remarried. My stepmother, Dorothy, helped raise my sister and me, along with our younger stepbrother, Melvin. Mama, as we called her, and the only mother I ever really knew, saw to it that I had plenty of responsibility in our busy household. She even taught me how to iron, and to this day I still iron my own clothes. Mama was disciplined and strict, but kind-hearted. She was always there for us if we needed her. I had no idea how important that would be to me in the years to come. When Mama was pregnant with Melvin, she was injured in a car accident and underwent x-rays as a result. When Melvin was born with mental and physical disabilities, we often wondered if the accident or the x-rays may have been the cause. As a family, we all shared the responsibility of taking care of Melvin, who required round-the-clock attention. He died when he was only 8 years old. It was a very sad time for all of us, and especially hard on Mama and Daddy. We felt like he never had a chance to enjoy life. I was 17 years old and a senior in high school when my father died. That Sunday afternoon, I was working as a carpet layer's helper. I remember being touched that he had made a sack lunch for me to take when I left the house that morning. That afternoon, he had gone to a union meeting. After the meeting, as he was walking down the stairs to leave, he suffered a heart attack. When I got the news that my dad had been taken to the hospital, I dropped everything and rushed there. Running in the main door of the emergency room, I asked the woman at the desk where I could find my father. She asked his name, looked through her records, and then said, "He's gone." "He's gone home?" I asked, hope rising. "No, he's dead," she said. Just like that. No fanfare. No, "I'm sorry to tell you this, but..." No, "Sit down while I get the doctor on duty." Just, "He's dead." The word struck me like a hammer, and I crumpled to the floor. There had been no chance to say goodbye to him. Without any warning at all, he was gone. There was nothing to be done. There was no place to go except home. I felt a rush of hurt and pain that swept over me, and I was angry, so angry that when I got home I put my fist through the hallway wall. Never before had I felt such intense emotion. He was too young to die. It wasn't fair to him, or to those of us he left behind. We all deal differently with pain, of course. Like it or not, death forces us to go through the pain of the grieving process. Some people have the benefit of a pre-grieving stage, which often occurs when a loved one suffers a long, painful illness and death comes as a welcome release. But with the sudden, unexpected death of my father, I was thrown head-on into the shock stage of grieving, seesawing between disbelief and unbearable emotional pain. I couldn't imagine life without Daddy. I didn't want to. I had lost too many of my family too soon, and I was sick of it. My father's death was the straw that broke the camel's back for me. No one gives us a script to follow during these life-changing events, so in my attempt to numb the pain that didn't seem to stop, I did what a lot of people do. I coped with my grief through escape, which included self-medication, plenty of partying, overindulging in food, and, I'll admit, too many beers on too many occasions. The momentary escape from the pain was a welcome relief, and with my daddy not around to keep me in line, I partied my way through the final days of high school. I did, however, manage to continue working on weekends. I had to in order to have the spending money I wanted and needed. I went to college because my stepmother said it was what my father would have wanted me to do. Sitting in class, though, I confess that I really didn't see the point. The truth was that I thought life was too short to take things so seriously. It seemed to me that a lot of the people I met in college were far too serious, especially many of the professors. In my opinion, partying was where it was at. I hid my pain by trying to be the life of the party. I started out taking business courses, but soon found them boring, so I began taking criminal justice courses instead. Perhaps watching too many cop movies gave me the idea that being a detective and solving murder mysteries would somehow be exciting. But all it took was one class visit to a state prison to figure out that I wanted nothing more to do with this criminal justice thing. Finally, I had enough. What a bunch of hogwash it all is, I thought. At that point in my life, I figured I would be lucky if I lived to be 30, so why was I bothering with college? What was the point? No doubt about it, I had a real what's-the-use attitude. The truth was that I'd had enough of all the pain and the stress of the losses in my short life, and I just wanted it all to go away. I may not have been a detective, but I did figure out that college wasn't for me. I dropped out after my 3rd year without even knowing what direction to take next. Not having any guidance from my dad, I knew I'd have to figure it out on my own. I definitely knew how to party hard, and fortunately I had no problem working just as hard at whatever job I had. When my father was alive, he had worked plenty hard to provide the things our family needed, so I knew from a young age that I would have to work to make money for anything that I might need or want. And besides, I liked the idea of having nice things. A shiny new Chevy pickup truck didn't sound so bad to me either. I had been working part-time all through college at a gas station owned by a young entrepreneur named Randy Patchar. Many weekends I also worked digging ditches for a landscape irrigation company owned by Alan Gores and his father. But after I dropped out of college, I traded sitting in a classroom for working full-time for Alan and his dad. I learned real quick that I didn't want to dig ditches the rest of my life, especially in the hot Texas sun. But I did learn to appreciate Alan and his dad's business sense, the things they had, and the level of success they had reached. I wanted the same things. I knew I needed to figure out a career path for myself. Alan became my mentor, and I eagerly learned everything he could teach me about his business, a self-directed trade school, you might say. By watching him, my ambition, which I didn't even realize I had until then, kicked in. I began thinking about how someday I might own my own business too. I dated here and there, but nothing very serious until I met Melissa. Pretty and smart, Melissa had majored in both English and home economics, graduating at the top of her class. One invitation to a meal of her home-cooked lasagna was proof positive that there's something to that old saying about the way to a man's heart being through his stomach. By this time, I was 24. Most of my friends were settling down, and I figured it was time for me to settle down too. 6 months or so after I popped the question, Melissa and I had a big church wedding and a beautiful reception at her parents' house. I was happy to be with her, and a little happiness was just what I was looking for. After we were married, we rented a one-bedroom apartment in Houston. I was working for Alan, and Melissa, although she had a teaching degree, worked for an engineering and construction company that specialized in designing and building oil refineries. Melissa stayed fit and trim by running, and we'd often run together. The years of partying and not caring what I ate had caused me to put on a few extra pounds, and I knew that the exercise would be good for me. Randy, my boss at the gas station I worked at in college, was only 3 or 4 years older than I was, but he had already found success as a young entrepreneur. One day, while I was at work, I mentioned to Randy that I'd love to own a gas station like he did, and if he ever wanted to sell the station, to let me know. I'm glad I did, because after he put the station up for sale, he asked if I was still interested in buying it. I sure was. I talked it over with Melissa, and we decided to go for it. So we bought the exact gas station where I had worked. The dream to own my own business was kindled, and I quickly set about making my dream come to life. Based on my taking over the gas station, it wasn't long before Melissa was able to quit her job. We worked together to build up our business. She handled the bookkeeping and filled in behind the counter and anywhere else she was needed. I handled the inventory, hiring, and pretty much everything else. But that was only the beginning. Just like Randy had done, we took the money we made from our gas station and bought another one. And eventually I built, from scratch, the Super Sack gas and convenience store in Huntsville, just north of Houston. One thing led to another, and before we knew it, we had 3. Once we had mastered and maintained a number of successful Super Sack locations, we felt there would be no stopping us. At least, that was the plan. As part of our newfound ambition, Melissa used her superb cooking skills to build up a successful catering business. I joined a couple of other friends in the oil field equipment rental business. They handled the sales for a special type of pump for oil rigs, while I maintained and delivered the equipment to different regions of Texas during the oil boom. Sometimes a pump was needed in an emergency situation, so I'd drive all night to deliver it. Seemed like all I did was work. Melissa and I settled into a routine. We built a house on the farm southeast of Huntsville that I had inherited, a gentleman's ranch, you might say. We had a few cattle, some hogs, and dogs and cats. We were very busy. It seemed like we worked from daylight to dark and then some. We had been married over 5 years before our daughter Carol came along. I had no idea that a blonde-haired baby girl with beautiful bouncy curls could turn my heart inside out the way she did. But there was no denying that she had me wrapped around her little finger from the get-go. She was the best part of my day. I was on cloud 9 and living the American dream. What else could I ask for? But there was always that nagging worry in the back of my mind. The older I got, the more I began to wonder if I might be destined to die of a heart attack like my grandfather and my daddy. The last thing I wanted to do was die early and leave my wife behind and my daughter fatherless as I had been. So in addition to my regular daily runs, I began working out even more at the local gym in an effort to make myself as fit as possible. I remember learning about the famous runner Jim Fixx. His fanaticism about running was spurred by his own father's death at age 35. Concern about his hereditary predisposition to heart disease led him to give up his habit of smoking 2 packs of cigarettes a day, shed his excess pounds, and eventually become the country's guru of running. His best-selling book, The Complete Book of Running, made him a millionaire. He was credited with starting America's fitness revolution as he preached the gospel that active people live longer. His story resonated with me. He was the expert, and I followed his example. I went from occasionally running with my wife to running every chance I got. It became an obsession. I discovered what the runner's high was all about. I would challenge myself to run up a hill just to feel the exhilaration at the top and the ease of running downhill. I'd try to run in the cool of the morning, knowing that if I didn't, I'd be sweating it out in the hot afternoon. I learned how to push myself when I wanted to quit. I might run only 5 to 8 miles on weekdays, but on weekends, I'd enjoy a satisfying run, often up to 18 miles. I wasn't the fastest guy in town, but I held my own in local races and half marathons. I joined up with my good friend Bill Carmichael, who was as much into running as I was, and we'd run as often as we could. My whole life soon became focused around working and running. I was caught up in my own desire to make a good living and to maintain my health based on what the experts told me. With every step I ran, I believed I was staving off my own premature death just like Jim Fixx, the running guru, recommended. I was determined to do all I could to stay fit and healthy and out of an early grave. Running kept me disciplined and taught me an important life's lesson, that every little challenge is broken down into one step at a time. That's as easy and as hard as every task is. Back on my early morning run that day, I found myself nearly lost in thought as I glanced at my watch. No time to spare. As I headed back to the house, I mentally checked off the tasks I needed to handle first thing that morning. Check to see if we had enough petrol at the station to get through the weekend. Check our grocery inventory numbers, the usual. Keeping everything running smoothly was a full-time job, and living on the farm and tending to it assured there was barely time for anything else. After a full day's work in town, there were cows and hogs to feed and dog runs to clean when I got home. And it seemed like there was always a fence to mend somewhere. No light on in the kitchen meant Melissa was still asleep. Baby Carol must still be asleep too, I chuckled, or the whole house would be awake. I was 32 years old. I had my own home, successful businesses, and a beautiful family. And I believed that by running and keeping myself fit and following the advice of the running guru, I had figured out how to sidestep my genetic predisposition to an early death. Life is good, I thought again. I've got it made. It was 5:30 a.m. by the time I finished my run. After a quick shower, I jumped in my truck and headed to town to open up one of our stores. I'd grab breakfast later in the morning at the restaurant down the street. There was a time when I'd typically load up on bacon, eggs, and anything else I wanted, thinking that the calories I burned when running would cancel out the calories I consumed. But after I discovered a book called Eat to Win, the Sports Nutrition Bible by Robert Haas, I changed my diet to include more vegetables and very little protein. I'd fill up at salad bars at local restaurants, work out 3 days a week at the gym, and run every chance I got. Over time, I began to notice that I was feeling more tired than usual, and had more than my fair share of colds, flus, and sinus problems. My solution was simple. I had to push myself even harder. And that's exactly what I did. The familiar drive to town that day left my mind free to wander. Melissa would be coming to the office to handle the bookkeeping later that morning, so we'd have a little time together. It wasn't exactly the quality time we had when we were first.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?